I'm Andrew Sinclair. I'm a creative writer, and the story I'll be reading today is The Games We Play. 1. You don't need magic to be real when an oak is dying in your front yard. It drops thin, arcing branches onto the grass for you to find with your friend. She lives down the street, a couple houses down. On the school bus, she gets off on the stop before yours, back before it clicks that everyone on the bus lives in the same neighborhood, so when you see each other from your respective driveways, you're both happily surprised. Now you make up games where you cast spells with the twig wands you find on the grass, and you grab chipped pieces of bark as dollars for your imaginary world. One late autumn day, while playing the game, you see ladybugs peek out from where the bark is chipped on the oak. Your friend notices too. She runs to the tree and begins to pry at its surface. The bark starts to give way, bending like taffy before it snaps off and falls to the grass. Suddenly, hundreds of now exposed ladybugs dance on the oak, still huddling together to brace for themselves for the oncoming winter. After the awe of such a sight fades, you and your friend sit in the lawn, alongside the scattered props for your game, and talk until the sun sets. You talk about your families, your school, and the games you two play. 2. An entertaining activity or sport, especially one played by children, or the equipment needed for such an activity, especially one played by children. Making up games, the rules, the props, the imagination behind it, is regarded as an activity for children. Lizzie Meiji was almost 37 years old when the Landlord's Game, a prototype of Monopoly, the most board game to ever be created, was patented. Social commentary is something often associated with art, with the intelligence that comes with age, but with the Landlord's Game, Meiji intended the players to directly understand and feel the destructive effects of monopolism in a parody of capitalist society. Perhaps the intent of the game was lost over the century. The largest fast food chain in the world, McDonald's, sells burgers, fries, and an annual promotional game based on Monopoly. That game, however, is more or less a vaguely hidden lottery. Certain pieces are made much more rare than others, and only a single grand prize is printed. The only reason it exists is to sell more food, to bump up their already massive profits. It just leaves consumers vying for an elusive prize they'll never win. A golden ticket from an uncaring corporation. A silly game. 3. In mid-August, before sixth grade starts, I move hundreds of miles away to the unfamiliarity of the South. For the first 3 years, I manage to be stuck in the past while not feeling anything. People don't talk to me, and I don't talk to them. Not like back home, where I rotate between different friend groups and talk to different people. Not that it matters. In my room is a desktop computer. There I escape spending most of my time playing video games and pouring any thoughts into them that could otherwise feed into my feeling of dissatisfaction. A growing dissatisfaction. Most of my interests stay in my old town. I was beginning to get into writing and was an avid reader. The sparks of passion died with my newfound apathy towards anything besides my games. My own little way to run from reality. I spend $15 a month for a subscription to World of Warcraft, a computer game where I live as an elf assassin fighting various forces of evil. It has colorful, cartoony graphics and gameplay compelling enough to make me lose focus on anything else I have to do. And surprisingly enough, I lose focus on everything else I have to do. My mind is lost to my game. 4. The word game carries an air of flippancy, a waste of time. Is this just a game to you? Something a child would find entertaining. Kids play hide and seek, adults play poker, and this is the natural order of things. The stakes of hide and seek are almost non existent. The only thing you have to worry about is being found or finding others, losing or winning. With poker, you're betting real money. Still a game, but with tangible stakes. When you lose, you lose. A type of business activity. To be willing to do things that are new, difficult, or that involve risks. Definitions that fundamentally oppose the flippant connotations of game. It makes the word broader in maturity. It makes the word span a larger age range. You don't grow out of games, you can simply recontextualize them. You can play slots, you can play blackjack, roulette, or poker. You can devote your life to these games, feeding them money and feeding them money and feeding them and letting them steal everything you have without giving anything back, without them providing any closure. A waste of time. 5. My dog considers himself a small game hunter. He chases after birds, rabbits, squirrels, or any creature that finds itself lost in my backyard. Since we moved, we find a lot more amphibians and reptiles, so I've had the displeasure of seeing my dog eat small lizards or devour frogs. What irks me is how prideful he is about it all, trotting up to my mother with the same sort of trot he does when he's carrying a squeaky toy, clutching a dead animal between his teeth. Like he wants recognition and praise for what he has, the corpse of some unfortunate creature, hanging like yarn between his jaws. The first time I see him with dead animal is only a couple months after we rescue him from the shelter. He carries it to the door from our backyard. The bird is injured. How else can it fall victim to my dog's viciousness? It could have flown away, could have been anywhere else besides the wrong place at the wrong time. I wonder, while my dog is trotting up to me, if he realizes the pain that that poor bird must have gone through. He took what was left of its life without realizing it. I wonder if he recognizes the permanence of death, his reckless taking of life, the nature of his hunt, the nature of his game.
Hello, my name is Emma Carter. I'm a creative writer, and I'm going to be reading you my piece, 30 Things About a Photo and a Fish Tank. Number 1. I don't know where this picture was taken. Probably Michigan or Ohio. The sky looks the same no matter what part of the Midwest you are in. 2. My grandparents stand in front of the door to their brick house. A potted plant with saggy leaves to my grandfather's left. 3. My aunts, Mary and Anne, and my dad sit in an unevenly spaced row. Mary and Anne are in front of my grandparents, while my dad sits off to the side, legs dangling over the stoop. 4. They all have on dress shoes. The girls wear tights, and the boys wear slacks, dressed as nicely as if they had just arrived home from church. 5. I don't know how old everyone is in the photo. My grandparents both look young. My grandmother almost looks my age, but I know she's older than 17. 6. My Aunt Mary sits in front of her father, smiling, her eyes squinted closed, probably because the sun is in her eyes. 7. Despite the sun, it is hard to tell what season it is in the photo. I can only guess that it isn't winter. The grass is still green. 8. Grass dies in the cold and turns brown. 9. 2 people in this photograph have had cancer. 10. My grandfather had cancer, probably before I was born. He survived. 11. My Aunt Mary was diagnosed with uterine cancer in 2015. 12. My dad sat my sister and I down in my bedroom to tell us, but I guessed what it was before he even said the word cancer. He told us that she was sick. We told him that it would be okay. 13. The cancer spread to Mary's brain. The time for hope was over. Now we needed hope for time. 14. On my dad's first of the last trips a few years ago to visit Mary, he came home with a fish tank. 15. The fish tank had belonged to Mary and her husband. I remember running through their home in Florida as a child and seeing the bright fish that filled the tank. 16. Mary gave the tank to my dad. It had become too much for her to care for while undergoing cancer treatment. 17. A week later, my dad walked through the door with 4 5-gallon buckets holding tropical fish and a tank that would fill the corner of our dining room. 18. For a while, all of the fish survived. 19. On rainy afternoons, I enjoyed watching them swim around, tapping the glass and watching the angelfish bump its nose as it turned quickly. 20. My favorite fish to watch was the smallest one. Despite being so small, it swam everywhere in the tank, not scared of the bigger fish. 21. Then something happened. The smallest fish died, or it was eaten by the shark that is in the tank. 22. We think that the shark ate the fish because there were no remains. The fish simply disappeared. 23. My Aunt Mary disappeared, gone before I got the chance to know her. 24. She died in January. In winter, the grass was brown. 25. In the fish tank, the grass was green year-round. It was as if time did not pass in the tropical fish aquarium. 26. I wonder if fish feel the years pass. 27. Sometimes I run my fingers over the mahogany wood of the tank and then press them gently under the lip that keeps it closed. 28. The lid is heavy. It keeps the water warm in the tank. It prevents time from passing for the fish. 29. When I shut the lid, it thuds like the lid of a coffin, and I see the steam rebuild at the top of the tank. 30. It keeps the cold of the outside world away. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aiden Simmons, and I'm part of the creative writing department, and this is my short story entitled Until Tomorrow. So, Jerry enters the Fizz bar on a cold, wet night. He sits at the bar, dripping wet, wearing a baggy white tee and some oversized blue jeans. Not fit for the weather, but clearly he doesn't care. He hasn't cared for much of anything as of late. Frank, the bartender, greets him with his usual Bud Light. He slides it down to him, and Jerry handles it just as it's about to slip off the counter. "It's good to see you're keeping dry out there," Frank says, trying to lift his friend's spirits, as he's come accustomed to doing whenever Jerry sits at his bar. "This night is different." "Not tonight, Frank," responds Jerry lifelessly. "Jerry, you gotta quit being so miserable." "Hell, even Mother Nature's starting to feel bad for you," Frank says. "You don't know me, Frank. You don't know the first thing about me or my life. All you do is serve me a cold one whenever I come in for one. Don't get all buddy-buddy with me. Just keep the drinks coming." Frank closes the distance between him and Jerry, as not to disturb the other customers with their conversation. "Look, I'm not asking you to be my friend. I'm just making an observation. You look like shit." Jerry takes a quick look at himself. "I always like this coming here." Frank leans in tight. "Yeah, but this is the shittiest I've ever seen you. I don't expect you to pour your fucking heart out explaining to me why you look the way you do. I'm just making an honest observation." Jerry smirks to himself and takes a sip of his beer. Although Frank had just said he didn't expect Jerry to tell him what was wrong, there was a look of almost childlike anticipation in his eyes. He waited awkwardly for it, but Jerry wasn't going to give it to him that easily. "Will you quit looking at me like that?" Jerry said, slightly annoyed. Frank adjusts and gives up. "Let me get you another one," Frank says, going back to get one more. Jerry smirks to himself once more. "Life just doesn't make sense anymore," Jerry murmurs. Whether or not he meant it for himself didn't matter to Frank. He was just excited to get him to crack. He hands him the beer and waits for him to continue. "I thought I had it figured out for a while there, but here I am, hopelessly lost." Jerry continued. "I tried drowning my sorrow with this. It's not perfect, but it's worked better than anything else." Frank hops in. "But that's the beauty of tomorrow, Jerry. You can wake up completely liberated from all the troubles that came before. Pain won't last forever. But if you don't quit while you still can, you'll never forgive yourself. And if you don't quit for you, quit for your family." Jerry sighs deeply and takes another sip. "Man, I gave up a long time ago. All I'm doing now is prolonging the inevitable. And that's the best any of us can do." He gets up abruptly from the bar with a glazed expression over his face. "See you tomorrow, Frank," he says on his way out. Frank, with tears in his eyes, he never knew he could feel this way about someone he barely knew. "See you tomorrow, Jerry," says Frank doubtfully. "Thank you."
Hello, my name is Dalen Hall. I'm in the creative writing department, and I'm going to be reading a fictional piece titled It Never Matters. Jacoby glared at the television, watching the replay of a black man on the ground being suffocated by an evil white cop. Deshaun, Jacoby's mom's boyfriend, yelled at the television, clenching his fist onto the leather rocking chair. Jacoby hadn't been paying attention to what Deshaun had been saying, but he knew he was spewing hate words towards the white cop. Jacoby had never seen Deshaun this angry. He was usually much calmer and collected, even when bad things happened. Jacoby then glared at his brother Bryson, who curled his blonde hair with his finger as he laid across the other side of the couch. "Hey, Mom, tell me why we adopted Bryson again," Jacoby asked. She was a fragile woman. There was no fat on her bones almost bursting out, as if her past unfortunate relationships had took a toll on her physically. With Deshaun, she was finally in recovery. "Jacoby, I've told you this story already," she said, her voice as soft as ever, stirring the pot. "Tell it again." "When you were 2, my best friend from college got pregnant, but she couldn't afford to have a baby, so when Bryson was born, she gave it to me. I was living with my mother at the time, and she supported it, and your father had gotten a better job. I figured that we'll all be together." "What happened to Dad?" "I've already told you this." "Tell it again." She let out a tired moan as if the conversation was exhausting. "He just left. With that, Jacoby turned back around to the television, watching the same recording. Mom? Yes, honey? I think I hate white people. You're 8, Jacoby. You don't know the meaning of hate yet, his mom argued. I know it when I see it, Jacoby announced. When do you see it? Whenever you have to take me to Dad's. Your hands grip the steering wheel more, and your eyes look mean. You're looking at me too much, boy, she said. Jacoby had noticed that whenever she got aggravated or frustrated, a pinch of southernness came out, as if she was reverting back to her roots. He only heard the accent when she was arguing with her boyfriend. He took this as a sign to be quiet. It was never a wise decision to make a black mother angry. Mommy, Bryson said, taking his headphones out, casually spinning them in the air like they were one of his play toys. Yes, dear, Jacoby's mom replied, her voice becoming more sincere. Jacoby hated the way she talked to him. Can you fix me some juice? Sure, baby, she said, turning her attention to the fridge. Why don't you get it yourself? Jacoby asked. He couldn't withhold his frustration. Because I don't have to, he said as Jacoby's mom put the paper cup of juice in his hand. At least look at the TV. I don't have to. Brat, what was that? Bryson said as if he didn't hear what had been said. Jacoby didn't say anything to this. He didn't feel like talking to Bryson anymore. Do you hate Bryson? Will you turn out like that? Jacoby replied, pointing towards the white cup on the black man's neck. His mother looked at the television and then looked back to her part. Maybe. I don't know. Then maybe. I don't know. Talk to my son, please, Jacoby's mom said to Deshaun. Her accent was gone and he was still in the chair, eyes still glued to the television. Look at that. This is what they do to black people, Deshaun said. Deshaun, Jacoby's mom called out. They're just killing us for sport. Deshaun, ain't nowhere safe in this world for a black man. Deshaun, his mom screamed, causing Jacoby, Bryson, and him to jump. Her eyes locked onto him. Talk to my son. The white one or the black one? Him, she said, pointing at Jacoby and then pointing at the suffocation of a black man behind him. He says he hates white people. Tell him that he shouldn't and that there's nothing to fear. Jacoby had thought she was quoting a gospel song off the radio for a minute. Deshaun sighed. Jacoby, come outside. Deshaun said, opening the door of the house. What are we doing? Get in the car, he said, opening the door to his Jeep so that Jacoby could get in. The window was already rolled down. Pretend I'm a cop. Now I'm going to ask for your license and registration. Let's see what you do. Okay, Jacoby said. License and registration. Jacoby began to look in the car for it. He was disrupted by the sound of Deshaun's fist being slammed into the door. You'll be dead if you do that, he yelled, going back out of view. License and registration. I don't have it, Jacoby said. Step out of the car. Jacoby did as he was told and hopped out of the car. He then attempted to put his hands in his pockets. What are you doing? Deshaun yelled. I was just putting my hands in my pocket. Put your hands up now. But I didn't do anything, Jacoby said, his voice now trembling. Deshaun put out a gun and aimed it at Jacoby. It doesn't matter if you weren't doing anything, son. It never matters. And in the distance, Bryson watched from the window, their eyes meeting one another, and at that moment, Jacoby saw his face, scrunched up from fear and confusion. His eyes were glossy as if he wanted to cry, but needed to know what was going on in order to. Jacoby wondered if Bryson figured it out. If he would look at the television now to see the white cop's knee on the black man's neck. If he would understand that his skin had more power than anyone's words. If he would understand why he and Deshaun were doing this, why the gun was pulled. If he would understand never to turn out like the cop on television. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Aradas. I'm a creative writer, and today I'll be reading the first 2.5 pages from a fiction piece titled Coins. His mom, his best friend for all his life until she died, always told him that he was going to get the collection. Hundreds and hundreds of coins, all serving some monetary value to others, but to him it was so much more than that. Those coins were his mother. They were her struggle, her perseverance, her love. It was something to hold on to. She took him along to every show, her travel companion, and in that he inherited her love for them. While he cherished those days on the road with her, he often wondered about the what-ifs. How different things would have ended up if they lived in a home that didn't roll, if his mother had chosen a path that didn't require her hands to be on the wheel so much, if he had been enrolled in an actual school with other kids. The coins defined who he was. He recognized the beauty in their engravings. As a boy, he didn't color much, but instead sat for hours tracing them. his finger acting as a crayon. His favorite had always been the first Philadelphia mint-enhanced uncirculated dollar, a part of the Sacagawea dollar series. His mother devoted her life to exploring each coin's significance and teaching him culture. For better or worse, they were his childhood. His father did what he had to do, providing his mother with what she needed to care for him, but not doing so himself. He never blamed the man. His mother played both roles, and she did so well. She gave him a life through birth and passion, as coins took over every aspect of his day-to-day. He continued on without her, traveling the states with the coins he amassed on his own, in addition to the collection they built together. And because of this, he was never alone, always carrying her presence with him. His mother taught him how to love as well, treating everything like it had value, because over time, vintage coins accumulated a great sense of worth. Though his engagement with younger people had been almost nothing, at shows he met plenty of elderly with different heritages and ethnicities. He learned of their culture and the different countries where their accents came from. The coins taught him how to count. They helped him understand numbers as he could grasp them in his tiny hands and see that money was not the only thing to be valued. His mother was young and adventurous and had become responsible for bringing a baby into the world at such an early age. But she didn't want that life to be the end of hers. So their home was a van she refurbished to be a living space, enough for just the two of them. She homeschooled him on the roads between each show. His knowledge and their relationship grew with each skill learned and state border crossed. She sold her photographs of the places they went, created a travel blog that became popularly admired, and made a small profit off the collection. They weren't wealthy by any means, but lived contently on frozen meals and avoided the temptation of finding value in materialistic things. His mother's passing was the only grief he had ever suffered from. She would tell him that he was fortunate enough to not have endured the pain of relationships or the loss of friends, as it was difficult to make long-lasting companions in their situation. Sometimes, though, he would feel like this life was more of a curse than a blessing, that he wasn't lucky to have not been in a relationship, but a stranger to truly living, because everyone everywhere seemed to have their heart broken at some point in time. That appeared to be what the rest of the world thought life was about. But he lived a life that consisted of his mom and a coin collection. He loved it. He did. The rest of the world just felt like a snow globe, with him standing outside of it, hands pressed against the glass, watching the people talk, even hold hands, and the neighboring kids run around, laughing with the family dog. He only dreamed of those connections. One night, they had been watching a joint favorite film, the classic Roman Holiday. His mom was amazed with Audrey Hepburn's elegance and stunning beauty, and he was stunned by Gregory Peck's charm and wit. The film was a sexual awakening and an introduction to life, teaching him a realistic portrayal of relationships. A romantic comedy starring a European princess who sneaks out for the night to see Rome, falls asleep on a park bench after taking a sedative, and is found by an American reporter. Attraction blooms between the pair, and they have a night pulled from a storybook. It ends with a heartbreaking kiss, and the two part their separate ways. He envied the princess. It was an ending sealed with closure, the woman content as she got a night away from her responsibilities. "Do you ever regret this life?" he asked his mother once the credits cued.
Hi, my name is Catherine Davis. My art area is creative writing, and this is a fiction piece I did called Out of Season. Everyone knew that the man in the van sold pot. They could smell it in the air behind the Costco wholesale. They could see it in the spring green paint job of his Ford Transit. They could buy it in little baggies between the hours of 9 and 5. But no one could say much else. There was no one living in the small Oregon town who knew where he lived, or where he was from, or even what his name was. He was simply called the man in the van, and not one Costco employee could remember a time when he hadn't been there. He seemed to exist outside of the world, and anyone who knew him often wondered what that was like. For obvious reasons, this was why he was mentioned frequently to out-of-towners. Some wandering tourist would ask if there was anything out of the ordinary, and the man in the van would almost always be noted. People had lots of fun describing what he looked like. They'd say he was stretched like a pine tree and had muscles in his back that rolled when he sat down. They say he spoke with a soft Canadian accent and said particular things about the sky. They'd mention he wore large dollar store t-shirts and had long frizzy hair most mistook to be a really bad perm. And when they were done with their descriptions, they'd do their best to explain why he was so compelling. In their own words, they'd say he was a figure who understood the difference between solitude and loneliness. They'd try to explain why everyone wanted to be him and why no one actually was. Then they'd usually talk about the ducks. How could they not talk about the ducks? Every winter they were there, large flocks of migrating fowl that flew down the North Pacific in droves, and when they'd reach the town, they'd swirl around the van like vultures. In this one tiny specific area, there were so many birds that people driving by the Costco could see them swarming around in the back. This is usually a pretty good sign that winter had begun. There is even an annual tradition among the Costco staff to schedule a party around the ducks' arrival. They'd make duck-themed party favors, pull up some chairs, and then drink for good weather. Every once in a while, the man in the van would be asked in, but he never accepted the invitation. "I'm a little busy," he'd respond, and sometimes he could barely be heard over the sound of quacking ducks. The town joke, of course, was that the man in the van was selling birds pot. Every year, large swatches of conversation were devoted entirely to this single mental image. Someone would mention it offhandedly, and pretty soon the room would spiral into crazed laughter as people wondered out loud what the ducks said, and how the ducks paid, and how the man in the van managed his prices. But eventually an out-of-towner would kill the mood and ask, well, what does he really feed them? Which meant a townsperson had to speak up and say, bread. This response left some impressed, a few intrigued, others a little jealous, and most just slightly let down. And this is why the townspeople tended to avoid giving them a real answer. It's definitely pot, they'd joke. You can see for yourself if you want to. Ironically, the story around the bread was less boring than the townspeople realized. It was actually one of the man's most interesting eccentricities. The bread was made out of a strange, lumpy substance that smelled like the sea, and somehow it was all homemade. The man baked piles of the stuff, and upon closer examination, a person could wonder if it wasn't bread at all. So what was it exactly? Where did the man in the van get his materials? How did he even find an oven? Only he could say. So most settled with the bread being store-bought and left it at that. Every third Sunday of October, the man in the van would close up shop, sit in the open back of his transit, and feed the ducks from 9 to 5. And the ducks would always come. There was something in the bread that seemed to drop them out of the sky. All right, that was an excerpt. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
Hi, I'm Reed Shumpert. I'm a creative writer, and today I'll be reading a short piece of fiction I wrote entitled The Ex-Wife. Just as a preface, our main character, recently divorced Susan, was visited by 2 members of clergy of the church down the street, St. Agatha's. This is the day after that. Susan woke up to an empty bed, now slowly becoming a relief to her, the ghosts of the past still clinging on to her clammy skin. She put on the first things her hands landed on in her dresser. The dresser was stuffed full of her belongings. The ex-husband used up all the closet space for his neatly folded shirts and dress pants, all of which Susan washed and folded and organized. She stood in front of the vintage wooden dresser that she had found at a yard sale for $23.64. As if she had lost control of her own extremities, she grabbed shirt after pants and threw them over her shoulder. She turned to face the bed she had since she married her ex-husband. She did not make the bed. She looked at the glowing green lights on the bedside table. It was Sunday. She thought of the man and woman who stopped by earlier. Maybe she could rekindle her relationship with the church. She had not stepped inside of one since her ex-father-in-law told his son to kill her instead of getting a divorce. Susan pulled a pair of New Balance shoes on her feet and stepped out of the back door, letting it slam behind her. Her feet knew where to take her. That church around the corner, St. Agatha's, was waiting for her. The doors to the sanctuary were propped open when she got there. The service had already started. Susan did not even briefly consider turning back. She slipped in through the white doors, The green carpet muffled her steps as she walked swiftly to a pew in the back row. Rediscovering what she used to believe in did not feel like a public event. The smell of must and off-brand Febreze clung to the air. Out-of-tune chords rang out from the piano that was once black but had since graduated to a dusty gray. The baritone vocals of the man from the other day danced in the airspace with a light, soft song of unfamiliar ladies in the front pew. Susan felt the song reverberate inside of her ribcage. A blue bird fighting to be set free. A handful of feathers got caught in her airway. She tried to push them down, but they would not retreat. The bird inside her chest longed for air beneath its wings, open skies. Freedom. At the end of the service, Susan was heading towards the door, but the pastor cut up to her before she could make it out. Hey, thank you for coming. We're having a group lunch in the grass area behind the chapel. I would love for you to join us. The woman with the stole from the day before said. Okay, lead the way. The words escaped Susan's mouth before she even had the chance to think about what she was getting herself into. How long has it been? The woman said, walking in the direction of the far side of the massive room. Pardon? Susan asked, close behind. Sorry, just a habit of the job. I can sense a soul that's long overdue for a visit. The woman held a cracked wooden door open for Susan. A while, I haven't been keeping track. That's all right. We welcome you. The woman said, opening one final door. We? Susan's question was answered as soon as her eyes adjusted to the sunlight. Hi, everyone, I'm sorry, what's your last name, sweetheart? The woman placed a hand in the center of Susan's back. Hi, I'm Susan. She paused for a moment, making a decision in half of that moment. Susan Miller.
Hi, I'm Cassie Drew. I'm a junior creative writer, and I'll be reading an excerpt from my fiction piece called Stargazers. Bree obviously did not think this through. Bringing her telescope to the roof of her house sounded like a good idea until she took her eyes off of what was supposed to be her focus and looked down. 1 second was all the anxiety needed. Then, quickly, the crisp night air that had been keeping her company became constricting. Her vision zoomed out, elongating the 2-story height difference between her and the stripe of pink roses her mother had planted that spring. Putting his hand up, Jax attempted to do like what they showed in the movies. He had read somewhere that the hand could be used to measure the distance between one star and another. The trouble was, he had no idea what he was doing. He doubted the people in the movies did either. He did know that the Big Dipper was part of a much larger constellation, Ursa Major, the She-Bear. 7 stars in the Big Dipper section, 17 that form the entire constellation. He laughed to himself, thinking of the 5 minutes worth of Google searching he did, and the subsequent purchase of one of those stargazing apps they have for free. All before he left his house. Jax never called that place home. That building didn't deserve the title that included memories and warmth just by saying the word. Bree was slowly backing away from the edge of her roof and felt for her window behind her. She wished she could call for some strong adult or anyone to help her. She thought, debating whether or not to call out. Her mother was getting the few hours rest she had between the long and strategically timed shifts she worked. Her father wasn't around to call on and hadn't been for some time. She kept moving. Her socked feet roughly slid across the sandpaper-like surface of the shingles, creating little fabric pills she knew she'd pick off. At last she felt the cool touch of her window pane. Jax continued to pretend to know what he was doing until, by some miracle, he found it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He continued all the way up to 17. He double-checked his work, halfway fiddling with the app, halfway trying not to lose his place in the sky. He had found it. He looked below and found Leo the lion. From their much more animated drawing on the app, the sky looked as though the lion and the bear had gotten into a fight, each running away from the other. Bree was finally safe within the confines of her room. She knew the next thing she had to do was get the telescope down, but she needed a breather, just to try and make the world stop spinning so quickly. In and out she breathed as she forced the world to slow itself. The world slowed to its usual speed on its axis. She leaned out the window and wiggled her body just far enough to reach the legs of her telescope. She slid the legs of the tripod over bit by bit against the rubber stoppers, staccato movements of the shingles. It was slow going. His back was starting to hurt from this forced, straight posture his body was not used to. He rolled himself over, then he pushed up, first to a half kneel like he was proposing to the stars, then standing on his 2 feet. Jack stretched upward, tilted his head back, and watched as the world spun just a little bit faster for a second. Flipped upside down, the grass became the skies, and the sky became the ground. From this angle, he could walk among the stars. He righted himself and was back among the mortals. With her telescope back in the room, Bree took a moment to breathe again. This time, the hot breaths were not from fear, but from exhaustion. The telescope was a lot heavier when you didn't have the 1.5 foot height difference for leverage. She was tired, but she knew she wouldn't rest until she was able to find it. Ursa Major. In the beginning, the search was just her and him on their backs in her bed. They would search the as close to correct constellations a 10-year-old girl could get. She had put them on her ceiling with plastic glow-in-the-dark stars. Many of those stars had to be taped now. The stickiness had worn out, as well had their relationship with her father. She still searched the stars, but it was without his guidance now.
My name is Andrew Williams. I am a junior creative writer, and I will be reading an excerpt from my story, The Song of Winter. In the fall of the year that Susan told me she wanted a divorce, I went to visit Grandpa in his house on the river. We were supposed to go to counseling that week, but I couldn't see the point in it. She had already made it clear to me that she wanted to leave. And what more could 2 sessions of overpriced counseling run by a know-it-all with a degree in a made-up field get us? Grandpa was the only counseling I needed, only counseling I ever needed. Sure, in his late years, he was less attentive, and occasionally his mind drifted off to tangents, but it helped to have a sympathetic ear. The leaves had already turned the color of the setting sun as I pulled into the narrow strip of gravel next to his house. Each year, the water eroded more and more of the riverbank, until eventually the house was bound to collapse into its murky depths and get swept away. I trudged up to the door, dragging my luggage behind me, and was answered by my Aunt Rhonda, a bitter, sour-faced woman bringing a mug of coffee to her dry lips. "Oh, it's you," she scowled. She scanned me from top to bottom and glared at my luggage, and upon seeing that I was unaccompanied, said, "So it's like that then. You can stay the night, but after that I'll be charging you." She wandered off into the house, and I dragged myself to my grandfather's back room, passing by pots laid out to catch rainwater that creaked in from the ceiling. Several stacks of newspaper lined the walls, rising high to the ceiling, some of them with dates going as far back as 20 years. Grandpa sat in his bed that fit his frame perfectly, short and wide, looking out as the herons plunged their heads into the shallows near the riverbank. They would rear their heads back up, a fish caught between their beaks, slimy and writhing, fighting for its life. Sometimes one would break free and plunge back into the water. Grandpa looked away from the window and finally noticing me said, "Reggie, my dear boy, it's good to see you." He walked over to me and put his arm around me, guiding me to his bed like a child being taken across a busy intersection, caught in the iron grasp of a worried parent. The bed creaked under my weight, and Grandpa darted into the maze of boxes that encircled his bed. "Just one moment. I know it's not your birthday, but I brought you a present," he called. He returned with a cardboard box, strung with a thick red bow. I gingerly took the box from his bony hands and looked inside. There was nothing in there but a single newspaper. "Is this it?" "It's a newspaper." He picked it up and tapped the date. "Not just any newspaper. This is the one delivered to this house on the day you were born." He flipped the newspaper and scanned the pages. "Rats. There was a coupon in here for half-off steaks. Oh, well. You don't eat steak, Grandpa." He crossed his arm and sat himself down on the bed. "I know that. But you never know when you're gonna need something. Anyway, let's talk about you. Tell me about what's been going on. So we sat there until the sun had long dipped under the trees and the herons carried themselves into the night. I told him about Susan, the kids, everything swirling around inside my head like an emotional maelstrom. And as always, he sat and listened, slowly nodding his head as I continued on my emotional rant. Aunt Rhonda occasionally brought in cups of coffee, and I could sometimes see her peering from the hallway, listening in for the latest family gossip to spread around. When I had finished, he sat there for a moment, listening to the croaking of the frogs. Finally, he said, "Did I ever tell you about my boat?" "No," I answered. He looked off into the night. I figured so. Back a long time ago, when your father was little, we had a great big house on the river, much bigger than this heap. And I owned a boat, the Song of Winter, I named her. I think I got the name off a bubblegum flavor or soap detergent box or something. Anyways, every day I would take her up the river and fish for hours, and come back in the evenings, and me and your father and Rhonda and your grandmother would take rides in the sunset. Oh, if you could have seen the way she glided across the water, engine buzzing, the golden sunlight glinting off her sleek design. He let out a deep nostalgic sigh and peered across the water as if he was searching for it. I had hoped he was finished. It wasn't unlike him to start a story that really didn't have an ending. But just as I was about to talk some more, he continued. What joy it brought me. But when the men from the bank came, I cut him off right there, holding up my hands in protest. Grandpa, I love you. But I don't care about your boat. This is supposed to be about me, my troubles. I don't care about something that you owned decades ago. It's not here now, is it? He looked back out at the water. Well, no, it isn't. But that's not the point. If you just let me finish. Damn it, Grandpa. No, I don't care about your rusty boat. It's probably in the landfill somewhere, or crushed up into a metallic cube. My exclamation must have startled him because he had let go of his mug, shattering into several thick pieces on the tile floor. Grandpa leaned over and scooped up the broken shards into his hand, and for a moment we sat there, me and Grandpa, listening to the creaking of the old house. Finally, he went over to the trash can in the corner of the room and dropped the shards. Tiny cuts covering his hands. Do you think I tell you these stories for no reason, boy?
Hi, my name is James Raven, and I am a creative writing junior, and today I will be reading a very short fiction piece titled The Morning After. This morning, my mother's eyes drooped like saddles off of a horse's rear. Her features seemingly flattened, her cheekbones lowered. She carried a plastic water bottle, and it crackled as she lifted it to her mouth. "Did you sleep well?" I said jokingly, hoping to hear her grumble some guttural response. "I did. Did you?" she said with an odd ounce of cheeriness in her voice. I thought to myself, she is full of bullshit. I heard a man in the house last night. I was sitting upstairs and scribbling in my sketchbook when I listened to the man's laugh and the way he ended his syllables by lowering his tone even lower than his tone already was. I wondered which one it was. I could barely make out what he was saying through the horizontal floor below. I threw my sketchbook aside and placed my ear on the hardwood, hoping to hear something, anything from this man. As my head was lying against the ground and my palms were positioned as if I were going to complete a push-up, I looked at the bright red numbers shown on my clock. It was 11:18 p.m. I heard the fridge door open, following the clink of 2 glass cups. I assumed she was getting the bottle of the half-finished red wine out of the fridge to share with this man who would leave before I woke up the next morning without a trace. Now, the next morning, after my mother had lied about the quality of her rest, she flopped onto the couch across from me. The hair, tangled and tucked behind her ears, jostled as she wiped her eyes with the plush sleeve of her robe. She yawned. "What time did you go to bed last night?" she asked as she took another sip out of the crinkled plastic bottle. "Midnight." "Me too. she said as she placed the water bottle on the coffee table. I knew she went to bed around 3 because I woke up on the floor. When I opened my eyes, I saw the clock displaying 2:30 a.m. I woke up to the sound of her laughing. It was surreal to hear her laugh. It startled me at first, but then I accepted the noise and fell asleep again. Only this time I crawled into my bed and wrapped myself in her drunken joy. I'm glad you got some sleep last night, she said. You've had a rough time lately with the divorce and all. I nodded and scooted across the couch, resting my head in her lap. She began playing with my hair, and I could smell the alcohol through her smile. I didn't mind it. At least she was happy now. I wondered how long it would last, and I smiled with her. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Grace Warren Page. I study creative writing at the Governor's School for Arts and Humanities, and today I'll be reading a nonfiction piece based off of observations of an old photograph. Katie and Kenny leave for Miami on their wedding night, 1969, a photograph. They sit in a car with velvet red interior, slouching in the back seat like teenagers, so close together their shoulders overlap, Illinois stars overhead. My grandmother's name is Katie, and she marries a man named Kenny. They meet in the mall in Illinois. He works at a piano shop. She works at the Belks next door. They fall in love and marry in the spring of 1969. The window of the car's cracked just enough for a camera to capture their smiles, the velvet, their silky black hair, Kenny's suit, Katie's dress, everything highlighted by a bright flash. You can see the twinkle in their eyes. Right before they slid into the back of the car, they wrap a piece of vanilla cake in plastic wrap, trying not to destroy the flour fondant and white buttercream icing. She probably has cake under her nails. I wonder if she's uncomfortable when her friends and family watch Kenny lick the cake off of her fingers in the middle of the church. I would be uncomfortable. My grandmother's hair is long and black and thick, frizzy from the humidity and lace wedding dress. Kenny's mop top has grown since the engagement, but his goatee is groomed. Kenny's hand is frozen in mid-wave, saying goodbye to everything he knew, leaving for Miami to become a singer at the Holiday Inn, to become a star. Katie doesn't wave goodbye. She just smiles. She doesn't look afraid to leave. I would be afraid to leave everything behind, to get in a car and leave my hometown and my sisters and the little church on top of the hill and my father's homemade peach ice cream. But she knows in Miami she will dance on the ballroom carpet until she slips off her favorite black heels and ties her hair up. Watches Kenny sing every night in the Hunter's Lounge, Tuesday through Saturday, 9 p.m. until 1 a.m. Every night, a cigarette bounces between her two fingers. The wives of the jazz singers always smoke. She likes the way the smoke leaves her mouth and fills the room while she dances barefoot and sings along to the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and Elvis. Her smile is perfect. Kenny dies a couple years after the wedding. In the car, she isn't prepared for death. She's thinking about Kenny and leaving the Illinois star she has become so familiar with. She never marries again. She quits smoking. She can't taste another piece of vanilla cake. I wonder if she ever watches the videotapes of him singing after the funeral. Maybe she hides them in a box in the attic. Maybe she shows her daughters. Of course they don't remember him. I find the picture. The newlyweds sitting in the red seats in the middle of the clear Illinois night, in a box tucked in the garage. Kenny waves. His mouth is open, almost like he's saying goodbye. It is my favorite part of the picture because it seems alive and moving. I can hear the voice I never heard. I imagine after the picture's taken, someone starts the car and drives them away to a cheap hotel room somewhere. Kenny probably sings. Katie probably points at different stars, giving them random, mysterious names. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Autumn Rajo. I'm a creative writer, and I will be reading an excerpt from my short story, Deidre. Thick, heavy snow drifted up the sides of the truck stop diner, gleaming under the yellow buzzing lights where it had melted and refrozen splotchy areas like a broken bone healing twice as strong. It crunched against the toes of Terry's over boots as he shuffled from his truck to the warmth of the restaurant, his arms tightly hugging his brown jacket around his body. It wasn't snowing anymore, but it had been just a few minutes ago, and as he turned to check that his truck was locked, he watched other drivers at the fueling station in the distance dusting powder off their cars with gloved hands. It was an empty-feeling town in Virginia, or rather just a cluster of restaurants and gas stations and palm readers around the interstate. With his hands jammed in his pockets, balled in fists, he attempted to imagine what the place would look like in daylight, in the golden age of road trips, as it would have when he was a kid. Gleaming, candy-colored cars lined up to buy burgers and a shake on the way to the Chesapeake Bay or Virginia Beach, or even on a slow crawl up to a New England Cape, with sunburned, freckled children laughing and dancing near warm parents' hands. Inside of the diner was Mormon Sheep. His feet dragged against the checker-tiled floor where grayish snow had melted into murky, shallow puddles, clouding against the patterns of white and red. A few sleepy waitresses flicked their eyes towards him from behind thick eyeliner. "Anything I can help you with?" said the tallest one, whose name tag read Deirdre. She had dark-permed hair and watering green eyes that reminded him of his mother's. "Yes," said Terry, sitting down at the counter. He pulled off one of his gloves and guided his vision with his index finger as he looked over the menu. The laminated plastic around it was slippery and greasy under his touch. "Fish sandwich, extra tartar sauce, and some gravy fries on the side." "You come in from 95 or 81? He glanced up. 95, he replied. She smelled like stale, sharp Newports and grease, but then again, everything smelled like grease. "What's your haul?" "Oranges." Deirdre smiled. "You know," she began, "I grew up in Florida. Just down the road was a Cara farm. Started right when they hit America. My friends and I would climb the fence and steal them right off the branches, and they'd chase us down this dirt road till we were out of breath." Terry wondered if she was telling the truth, mostly from what sounded like a Staten Island accent in her gravelly voice, but she seemed to enjoy saying it so much that he quickly forgot about it. He folded his hands and looked back down at the menu again. Maybe he could get a slice of pie or cheesecake after his meal. After all, it was nearly Christmas, which he had almost forgotten about until he saw the half-dead lights strung up around the corners of the diner. "You're not much of a talker, are you?" said Deirdre, to which Terry shrugged. "You got a family to return to for the holiday?" "No," he responded, shaking his head. "I never really had time. I've been driving since I was young." "You didn't even have a girl in high school you were serious about?" "Not really," he answered quietly. He hadn't been serious about much in high school at all, really, keeping to himself. He was never into varsity sports or clubs or even an instrument. Never a lot of friends, if any, and the idea of strong hobbies or close friends other than the ones on the radio were distant and seemed impossible. "I don't have much of a family either," Deirdre sighed. "I've got a guy, but no kids. I'm an aunt, though, and let me tell you, it's a real gift. 2 nephews. Loads of trouble, I tell you, but they're a real gift." "That sounds nice," Terry thought aloud. "I was an only child. It might have been nice to have someone else growing up with me, I suppose. You struck me as a bit of the lonely type. Though I suppose drivers like you don't really get a lot of time to set up a family or something, I suppose." Terry chuckled. It was true. The only company he had time to set up were the stacks of Neil Diamond and James Taylor cassettes that he kept with him, playing them over and over again until he knew them like the curves of the veins on his hands. When I was a kid, I always thought I'd live in a pretty yellow house with window boxes and shrubs and a nice dog and maybe 2 or 5 kids, she mused. Funny how life gets you. I thought I'd be a Broadway actress too, but we see how that worked out. "Well, maybe you still can," Terry offered. "Be a Broadway actress, I mean. It's never too late in life to start anything. Can you sing?" "Me?" asked Deirdre. "No, but it's nice to dream." She brought his plate to him from the flat top, smiling as it clicked against the plastic countertop. "Fish sandwich, fried, extra tartar sauce and gravy fries." The plate was steaming, tartar sauce rolling off the sides of the fish fillet, its sour, briny smell filling his nose. He immediately picked up the sandwich and took a bite with a big smile on his face. Somehow, 500 miles from home, everything seemed to taste like childhood, from the slightly out-of-season cod to the extra tangy sauce to the bun, just like the way his great-grandmother and grandmother and mother made it, each stirring the sauce and frying the fish with a Newport hanging out of each of their mouths. Thank you!
Hi, I'm Em Moore. I'm from the Creative Writing Department, and today I will be reading an excerpt from a creative nonfiction piece entitled Types of Love, a Playlist. In this piece, I took different songs and lyrical excerpts from these songs and created a playlist of different memories that have connections to different types of love, and I'm going to read you 2 of the scenes, which are 2 different memories. Track 4, Romantic Love. Lillian by plus 44, 4 minutes and 39 seconds. Your heart is a grave, to be perfectly honest. Your mouth is a smoking gun, and I smile while you're twisting the knife in my stomach until everything is gone. I lie in bed at 2:30 in the morning, eyes drawn to poster-covered walls and the chaotic ceiling above me. I wrote my favorite quotes on pieces of printer paper and tacked them to the plain white drywall on a night like this one. The result is something messy and colorful that I study when I don't want my mind to wander anywhere else. I think too much when I'm awake. Pieces of songs, stories I don't remember well enough to write, and people who have run their course, broken promises and what I wish I could be, fragments. Sometimes the fragments arrange themselves into an image of a girl with hair like fire and glasses across her face. My own Lillian, who tears me down by speaking a few words and builds me up again with even less. The smallest things make me think of her, a certain brand of tea or a cat through my neighbor's window. I pick up my phone and see that it's 3:47. I don't check it as much as I used to, avoiding the empty space where she hasn't texted back. A piece of me aches every time I see that blank screen, and when she does reply, my stomach turns. I'm nauseous. I feel a stab of fear and the same nausea as I think about my alarm. It will sound soon and signal that the moon has risen and set. I'll have slept less than 3 hours in the past couple of days once 6 o'clock comes. Panic will grip my shoulders and rattle my bones at the shrill sound of the alarm, my mind longing to be somewhere other than my sad reality. My breathing will quickly increase and my eyes will squeeze shut as I try to ignore the leaden lump of dread in the center of my body. The first thing I think of to calm down will be her, and that fact is something that will soon destroy me. For now, though, I lie awake, tethered to my bed. The scent of white magnolia still lingers in the room, despite having blown out my candle hours ago, and my box fan whirs smoothly behind me. I stare up at my ceiling and connect the dots of each tack stuck there, creating constellations. 5:52, less than 10 minutes until I'll pretend to wake up. I understand now why people pray before bed, seeking blessings for the night and wishing to be unconscious, escaping to a different world with a head resting peacefully against the pillows. Track 5, Self-Love. Amaryllis by Shinedown, 4 minutes and 4 seconds. I wish you'd open up for me, 'cause I want to know you. Amaryllis, Bloom. I spent the June before my junior year of high school renovating a house on Lake Marion, discovering that though it may take a while, I will feel better. I grind 14-hour days with my father and siblings, tearing apart and rebuilding the mess that we are given to work with. We prepare the outside of the house for new siding, install completely new windows, replace the rotted subflooring, a mountain of work. Through all this, I reconstruct myself, too. New friends appear, and I talk to them without shutting myself away. I learn to let them go. I no longer cling to my fear of change as I watch things progress around me, a house transforming daily from being half-finished into something I'm proud to say I helped build. When I'm not working, I go to Goodwill or swim in the lake. Despite my fear of water, I push against the rules I've made for myself to avoid being hurt, and when it gets too much, I stop to take a moment to breathe. Breathing is easier now. Everything is with practice. I go for a drive or sit on a newly finished porch and feel the wind playing with my hair. I count my breaths and close my eyes, leaning back into the rocking chair and exhaling. On the first weekend free of work, near the beginning of July, I wake at dawn and sit on the dock, the sun staining the sky pink, orange, gold. The air holds a chill it hasn't since April, and my hands smooth over my legs to warm them as they dangle above the water, swinging from my perch on the railing. I am the only one awake. Birds graze the water without leaving a ripple, scooping a fish into their open mouths. Green leaves hang from the trees and sway slowly from side to side, a rustling lullaby. There's not a boat on the lake, and the water reflects the tree line as the sun rises, a glittering mural. I am the only one awake, but I am not alone. I open up. Bloom.
My name is UJ Daniels, and I'm a junior in the creative writing program. I will be reading an excerpt from my fiction piece titled Redbone, and I will be starting at the point where the main character, Oba, is at a crossroad. She is autistic, and her mom doesn't understand her disability and despises her because of who her father was. And she wants her to be everything that he was not. including skin color, physical descriptions, and mentally. The only person who understands Oba is one of her mom's many boyfriends, Mr. Garvey, who is also Oba's child psychologist at her school in the heart of Harlem, New York. That's how they met. Oba was listening in to her mother gossip about her to Mr. Garvey. And he was advocating for her, trying to get Keisha to see it from a different perspective, but she's very hard-headed and wanted to just see it from her point of view. So he creates a diversion to keep Keisha, her mom, from talking about her in that manner. So I will start from there. As Oba pressed against the wall harder, trying to process what was going on in the silence, she could hear faint moans and kissing. She snatched away, shook her body loose of her goosebumps, and went to the bathroom. She looked through the shower caddy, grabbed her washcloth, and began pouring water and bleach on it. Oba looked just like her mother, even though they both were in denial. They had dark mocha skin, thick, coarse hair, big caramel eyes, a wide nose, and big lips. Oba took after her dad when it came to height, and she was short, but her mom was pretty tall and slender. According to her mom, she took after her dad in many aspects, except Oba never wanted to leave her mom for a, quote, red bone bitch, as she would say. Despite being pushed away and scolded for little things, Oba clung to her. Oba, fix that nappy hair, girl. You look trashy and unkept. Oba, didn't I tell you to clean that room? You are such a pig. Oba, have you been using that lightening cream I put in the bathroom? Remember I told you to use it to brighten your black ass up. All that shit is dirt. Because when I used to wash you, you were lighter than that. You were prettier when you were light-skinned. You starting to really take after that man more and more. When was the last time you washed, Oba? You probably stank. Go in the bathroom and wash your tail, her mom would scream and yell. Nonetheless, Oba would answer her questions to the best of her abilities and would do whatever she said. But there was always one question she couldn't answer. Oba, why are you like this? Oba lifted the washcloth up to her face and began scrubbing. She scrubbed faster and harder, trying to remove the color from her skin, but there was no look. She started to cry, and through the tears and snot streaming all down her face, she closed her eyes tightly. Think, 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 she said, squeezing and beating the sides of her head with her soaked red hands. The bleach began to irritate her skin and eyes to the point where she crawled to the bathroom tub, ran cold water, and sunk deep into the pool of cool, murky water. Oba sat silently in the tub with tears and crusted snot staining her face. She laid back in deep thought. She closed her eyes, and a memory flooded her. Thank you.
I'm Creative Writing Junior, and I'll be reading a fiction piece titled The Night the Moon Smiled. We were walking through the city, and she was talking about the way the moon was shining over the buildings. Her talent was seeing the beauty in things so normal. She squeezed my hand and shrieked. It was cold. Michael, look at it. It's so beautiful, she said. I looked in the direction of her pointer finger and said, yeah, it's amazing. Look at it. It's so bright. It kind of hurts my eyes. I was pointing upward as well. Michael, that's a lamppost, she said. She wasn't as amused as I was. I smiled in her direction as she looked down at the ground. Her silence was worrying. We promised each other that we wouldn't waste any of our breaths together. Her head hung low, and she kept glancing at me and then immediately back at the ground. Her brown eyes looked black in the darkness. In the sun, they were a glimpse into heaven. She hated her eyes. She would say that I was so lucky to have blue eyes. She said that my eyes reminded her of the way the waves sway back and forth on a warm day. She loosened her grip on my hand and dropped it to her side. We walked quietly for a few minutes. I walked ahead of her and started dancing. The only sounds were my feet as they hit the ground and a guitar that was echoing in the distance. She lifted her head and smiled at me. She started waddling side to side in an attempt at being rhythmic. I broke my stride, turned towards her, and stopped. Let's go get a drink, I said. Michael, you're 17. We aren't supposed to be drinking, she said, shaking her head. Her hair fell down the sides of her cheeks. It felt weird to think that 8 months before this, we were both bald-headed and shopping for wigs. Landon, I was thinking coffee, I said. Her cheeks turned red. We were about 5 minutes away from Kathy's Coffee and Things when a homeless man who was playing guitar and wearing a top hat saw us and asked what we wanted to hear. Landon held on to my arm and said that we should just keep walking. I slithered out of her grip and walked up to the man. I whispered a song title into his ear and asked him if he knew it. He smiled and assured me that he did. "What are you?" she began to say. "Shh, just listen. Here, sit with me," I said. I took my jacket off and laid it on the ground for us to sit on. The man began to play. He hummed the first 2 lines of the song. He began singing with his heart on his shoulder. His voice sounded full and happy. His fingers danced along the strings as he sang. Every race was just for fun, and she ran without a care. Today is one step closer to being back like then, when pink is just a color again. Landon let out a groan, and she stood up and grabbed my hand. "You okay?" I asked. "Shut up, old man," she said. Her eyes were glistening in the moonlight. No, they were glistening in the lamplight. She lifted me up and wrapped her arms around my neck. I put my hand on her waist, and we swayed back and forth slowly. She tucked her bottom lip under her teeth and leaned her head back to look at the sky. Her hands were cold, but that didn't matter to me much then. The man lost track of the lyrics and began singing his own version of the song. We laughed. He laughed with us, and I dropped a $20 bill into his top hat. He tossed the hat onto his head, and some change clanged to the ground. He twirled around, and then he bowed to us. As we were walking away, I looked back at the man. I wanted to remember him when all this was over. I was walking a step faster than her. She hated when I did this. "Michael, why are you walking so fast?" she asked. Her breath was escaping her, but her smile stayed constant. "Leading you in life and ahead of you towards death, my dear, just as a man should be," I said, laughing. Her smile weakened, and her hair wrapped under her jaw as if it was shielding her ears from hearing my comment about death. She didn't like to talk about it. No one did. But over the past month or two, she had started joking more with me about it. I think she knew it made me feel better about it all. There was a slug sliding on the side of a building with a neon blue light that said, "Come back soon." Landon pulled my arm over to the wall and said, "Watch." We stood there for some time. Jerry, the slug, found himself getting closer and closer to the warmth of the LED lights that were illuminating Landon's childlike smile. Imagine a life where all you have to worry about is avoiding table salt and finding somewhere warm to sleep, she said. "What else do we have to worry about? I've been watching my sodium intake, and Mom said you could take the spare bedroom anytime," I said. "Look, Michael, watch," she said. "Look at him move." Jerry rested directly on the blue lights. He seemed to shake his bottom into a position of utter comfort. Landon stepped closer to Jerry and whispered something to him in another language. "It's Arabic. All mollusks speak Arabic," she said. "It means peace be upon you." She waved to the slug as we walked away. It started getting colder with the breeze, and in that moment I was wishing that Landon and I had our own come back soon sign. "So," I said, "what are you going to order?" "I was thinking about getting an iced chemo macchiato." "Hold the chemo," she said. She began laughing before she could ruin the joke with an explanation. "Oh, that does sound good," I said. "You know what, Landon? You've sold me. I'm going to get the same." When we walked through the doors of the coffee shop, I saw the barista roll her eyes and put her phone face down on the marble countertop. She put on a manufactured smile and lifted her voice. "Welcome to Kathy's Coffee and Things. What can I get for you two?" We walked up to the counter. A second or two went by. We looked at each other, then back at the barista, and like children we said, "Hot chocolate, please." We paid, grabbed our drinks, and went outside to sit. "Landon," I said. She lifted her eyes from her cup. "When this is all said and done, will you talk at my service? Will you tell everyone about this night?" "Of course," she said. "And will you do the same at mine if things go differently?" I told her that I would. And As I look around this room, I see some faces smiling, some faces deep in their partner's shoulders, and all of our faces with tears running down our cheeks. And I'm telling you all about the night that Landon made the moon smile.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Wilson. I'm a senior creative writer from Hampton, South Carolina, and today I'm going to be reading my fiction piece, Somewhere Nearby Connecticut, There's a Clan of Vampires and a Woman He May Never Know. In this period of his life, he slept on an inflatable mattress patched together with duct tape because his toenails had poked through the rubber. He had been unable or unwilling to clip them himself. He was telling this to his girlfriend while at his niece's birthday party. His girlfriend texted him back and told him she used to pick her toenails until she couldn't walk, and so she missed work, and so she was fired. His niece showed him a caterpillar that had climbed onto her finger. He said it was very good, and she flicked it into the pool where he assumed it would drown. His sister scolded her daughter, and that was when he said he had to go. On his drive home, he looked out the car window and saw cows and chickens. What an odd combination, he thought. He wondered if the chickens would ever sleep underneath the cows. I think that would be funny, he thought to himself, but he didn't laugh. When he got home, he asked his girlfriend what she would think if she saw something like those cows and chickens in the field. She asked if he meant that the cows were in the field together or separately. Separately, he replied. His girlfriend did not think that cows and chickens could live together. He insisted that he saw them in the field together on his way home from his niece's birthday party. The cows probably step on the chickens all the time, she said. Probably tons of dead chickens in that field and you didn't see them. He thought she was accusing him of something. It was so hard to tell over text. Maybe the chickens lay eggs in their coop? A cow's too big to fit in their coop, and if chickens are dying, I think a farmer would have moved them by now, he said. She didn't respond for a few minutes, which made him think he had said something wrong. How many chickens were out there? She finally asked. I don't know, he replied. Hundreds, maybe? That's a lot of dead chickens, she said. You know, I used to have a chicken coop, and I would go out there every morning and get eggs from it. And one morning I went out there, and there's just dead chickens everywhere. In the coop, outside the coop, all in the woods, and then I see this pack of wolves. They're kind of off to the side. They killed all the chickens, I guess, but I don't really know what they were still there for. There are wolves in Connecticut, he said while sitting down on his mattress and feeling it deflate under him. There must be a hole in it somewhere. Nearby there, she replied. I'm not really from Connecticut. So where are you from? He asked. Just nearby. Her answer confused him, a common trend in their relationship. Thinking about Connecticut made him tired, and so he thought of wolves again, which made him think of werewolves and then vampires. He fantasized for a moment that Connecticut was all trees and no cities, and there was a clan of vampires sleeping in a cave nearby the farmhouse he imagined his girlfriend lived on. There would be a day when his phone would light up with a text saying she was in danger after being taken by the leader of the vampire clan, who was madly in love with her after watching her grow up, and it would be up to only him to save her. He would get over his fear of airplanes and fly out to Connecticut, and he'd kill the leader with a wooden stake, and the rest of the clan would run off with their vampire speed, and he'd be alone with his girlfriend in the cave when he would take off her blindfold and they would lock eyes for the first time and, Are you still there? She texted him. Yeah, he replied. The conversation about Connecticut and wolves had died. Have I told you that I drew a picture of you? He asked. No, you haven't, she replied. He grabbed the frame off of his desk and took a photo of the drawing inside and sent it to his girlfriend. Did you just draw what you thought I looked like? She asked. Kind of, he said. It's the girl who bags groceries right by my house, and she's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. So I just imagined that's what you look like. Oh, she said. I think I should come to Connecticut, he said, though after he sent the text, he remembered how she was only nearby Connecticut. I want to meet you one day. You don't seem like the Connecticut type, she replied. What's the Connecticut type? He asked. Well, you know that one Billy Joel song about New York? It's kind of like that, she said, though he thought that didn't explain much for him. Are you the Connecticut type? He asked. Well, that depends on who you ask. You just said I'm the girl who bags your groceries. That's not how I meant it, he said. I just think she's very beautiful. The girl in the grocery store or the girl you drew? She asked. No, he said. I'm talking about you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Krista Young. I'm a creative writer, and today I'm going to be reading 3 poems. The first one is called Hepburn and I Explore the World. I'm finding the wonders of the world in my bedroom. My lamp, the lighthouse, the trees breaking concrete on a carpet, the hills of Machu Picchu. Water bottles, the reflection pool of the Taj Mahal. But when they disappear, I go colorblind while staring at Audrey Hepburn. Center of canvas, neck bleeding into primary colors. My fan is New York air, and I'm Lady Liberty now. Audrey watching me from below, afraid of me, afraid for me. Heat is rising to our fingers as we're thinking of exiles, like when I'm no longer home alone, and I close my bedroom door tightly shut because I don't want anyone to find me here, creating my version of the picture without the paints. Just dirt and stone from my walk with mountains. I hate this feeling of dirty fingers. Time has been passing faster than I thought. Downstairs, meals have been prepared. My shower rusted, the mud dried. What can one do with only dirt and my sick self? My spine peeking out from beneath skin. My body aged what looks like 100 years. The second poem is called Girl and I Got Problems. We run in the woods in search of leaves and branches to burn. No fuel for the fire, but no fire either. She's so in love with me. Yells jump when she knows I might trip as we race, and I count on it, conscious of her signal. Girl falls face first onto wet earth, and I follow her lead. A few feet apart we groan, a harmony of pain. We don't know what to do with each other's hands except hold them. When the ground finally starts to soak in last night's rainwater, the sky decides to pour. We loosen our grip. We get up. We think we might drown. Our body's just the beginning of the flame, smothered. And finally, the last poem I'll be reading is called Doctor Asks If I'm Sexually Active. Get it through your thick skull. My body has never been spotless. When my hands are dirty, I don't wash them. I spray 62% ethyl alcohol hand sanitizer in my palm and call it a night. I spend too much of my time in the shower thinking about being out of it. I stand in the window wrapped in my towel looking toward the man in his backyard, his arm wiping off sweat. I inspect the underwear on my floor, never knowing worn from washed. But yeah, to go to sleep, I dream of being loved. You're so pretty. I want to marry you. When I meet someone new, I remember the smell and nothing else. He asks again, like I haven't told him all the ways in which I am unpicked and untouched. Let me rephrase. All my love poems come in clusters. All my underwear is stained green. Sometimes my shit runs blue. Who could love that? I ask him, what's it to you? Like I've even begun to answer his question. Like the stench isn't what we're really here for. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Imarose Gowans. I'm a senior creative writing student from Swansea, and today I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a piece that I wrote earlier this year titled Slow Winter. I'm going to give a little context first because I'm going to be jumping in the middle of the piece. So this piece is written from the perspective of a middle-aged mother in a rural community who is grappling with the fact that her neighbors are hunting pigeons, which is actually illegal in many states because pigeons have surprisingly really human-like pain receptors and mate for life. So this is from her perspective as she deals with some different experiences and feelings. So I'm going to go ahead and hop in. Literally no one talks about infinite numbers after high school. Or college, I guess, if that's your thing. Back when we were in high school, my husband and I swore to each other over our pre-cal homework that they were just one of those heady, made-up academic concepts. But I know the truth now. They're real, but not in the way they teach them in school, in the not entirely speakable way. Like how this one time I was watching the History Channel and the narrator man told me that the Milky Way contains somewhere between 250 and 500 billion stars, and how every single star is made up of countless particles of hydrogen and helium that churn together in their nuclear cores to exude the light and heat we see from our truck beds at midnight. No way there's a number to count those star particles, ever birthing and rebirthing themselves like tiny vessels of hope. When my baby was born, his skin was so thin and translucent, I sometimes worried that his veins were going to burst open. His entire body felt like the skin under my eye, puffy, pale, not quite human feeling, but also not human, in the way only babies and people whose bodies have been stolen by aliens are. I also watch a lot of alien shows on the History Channel. My baby isn't a baby at all anymore, though. He's tall and smart, and Labor Day weekend came home from his fancy Northeastern college and informed his father that he was a vegetarian now. Said, "Listen, Dad, don't get mad at me, please. I just really don't like the idea of eating food that had a mother, okay?" At the time, I was breading fried chicken for dinner. I looked down at the meat, soft and raw in my hands, and for a moment I imagined it was my pigeons. Wondered if I should become a vegetarian too. What would my husband say? Already, his eyes were fixed, all confused and bleary, on our son. I don't think he could be happy in a house that didn't serve meat at supper every night. Through the kitchen window, I saw 2 pigeons encircling the live oak out in the backyard. They were gray and a little fat and completely average looking, but in the moment I swore they were the most beautiful creatures I'd ever seen. I wondered if they were life mates who were so very in love that they always traveled together. I wondered if my son would start missing pepperoni pizza and go back to eating meat in a few months, or if this was a deeper, ethical thing. Knowing him, he'd probably spent hours doing research for some academic paper on the atrocities of the meatpacking industry, and subsequently swore off his own consumption. I wonder if pigeons are vegetarian. I wonder if my son will marry another vegetarian and raise vegetarian children together. Even at 20, his skin is so philosophy major pale that you can see the spidery framework of his veins all blue on his chest and arms, just like when he was a newborn. Outside, I hear gunshots ringing in the distance, and I imagine what my son would say to the neighbors in the house to the left who kill pigeons. I know he thinks about them. He's always thinking. I wonder if he's thinking about life after college, about how often he will come visit home. I wonder what he thinks about me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tate G. I'm a creative writing senior. I'm going to be reading y'all 2 poems from my chapbook. For a little bit of background, this chapbook is about Dante Alighieri and Beatrice Portinari. Dante wrote The Inferno, the Divine Comedy. Beatrice Portinari was the daughter of a banker in Florence. She first met Dante when they were both no older than 10 at a May Day party. Dante immediately fell in love with her. She became kind of his muse. She shows up in almost all of his works. They never court, they never get married. Dante was just kind of obsessed with this poor woman. So the first poem is titled May Day Memory, Fading. Today you have married another woman. Have we met before over this wall? Both children, I suppose. Everything seems brighter when one is small. Behind closed doors, I comb my hair with intent. In the corner, I cradle younger sisters. Soon I will make emotion look simple as it is handed to me. First love is yours when you are small. Take my hand as is polite. Run as is your nature. I do not mind. I braid blonde hair. This is the beginning of grace one-sided. First sight is different when one is small. I know what you carry is heavy, Dante. I know these words are dense. The load of this is not easy. I cannot greet you as if we were young. And then the second poem is called Dante's Beatific Vision in the Nicene Creed. We believe in one God. You take me by the hand and I am passed from Virgil to love. The Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, I am told that ascension is a descension. I pay no attention to technicalities with you. Of all that is seen and unseen, today I am new. Today I am yours. I have traveled from life to light. God from God, which you have summoned can take me no further. I will follow you anywhere. Lust, limbo, these are the beasts I cannot escape. Light from light, true Christian, divine love. Each blinding circle moves just closer to something I can touch. True God from true God, essential to a man's salvation, I like to believe you are mine and mine only. I am pure enough to see stars and you in his arm. You will pass all gates, every gate, as I am introduced to paradise.
Hello, my name is Hayden Gavin. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and today I'm going to be reading you a flash fiction piece that I wrote called Unique. Johnny's life could be summed up in one word: ugly. Johnny lived in a small home where cockroaches wouldn't run even when the lights were turned on. Johnny's parents fought constantly about things he couldn't understand yet, and occasionally pointed at him while he sat on the floor smashing the bugs. Johnny was disgusted by the roaches, but he also felt sympathy for them. At school, Johnny was made fun of for an incident. He had brought a bag of dead roaches for show and tell, which had earned him the nickname Bug Boy. Johnny's mother said he was unique, but he thought he was ugly. Johnny was 8 years old, and his birthday was coming up. Johnny's mother had decided to take him to a museum full of bugs. The museum was inside the old house of some famous lepidopterist, and all the specimens he had collected were on display. There was a grand room. The walls were filled with display cases of colorful butterflies. They were labeled with words he didn't know, pinned with their wings spread so one could appreciate their true nature. Johnny was in shock. All the disgusting bugs that he could see. He wanted to destroy them. Johnny reached out to grab one of the display cases, and his hand was smacked away. Johnny stared up at his mother. She shook her head. "Just look," Johnny's mother said. "No touching." Johnny looked around in disappointment. Why collect all these bugs, he thought. Johnny's eyes were set on one butterfly in particular, a black and orange specimen, almost 3 inches in length. It would have fit perfectly into the palm of his hand. The label read Vanessa Atlanta, but Johnny didn't know what it meant. There were many other butterflies that Johnny could have picked, but this common butterfly was displayed at his eyeline. When Johnny's mother wasn't looking, he pressed his hand against the glass. Johnny moved his palm to the bottom of the case, where he could feel the latch. A hand tapped him on the shoulder. It was wrinkly and delicate. "Be careful," said the lepidopterist. Johnny flinched, not sure if he should move his hand. When his mother noticed and began apologizing and tugging Johnny away from the wall. Johnny and the butterfly case came away from the wall, and the case landed face down, audibly cracking. The lepidopterist picked up the case, checking the damage. Johnny saw the pieces of glass that had blocked him from the butterfly laying dangerously on the floor. The lepidopterist took the case into another room, leaving Johnny's mother to start a frantic rambling of apologies that no one was listening to. Johnny followed the lepidopterist through a hallway into a living room. Going deeper into the house felt like moving into the mind of the lepidopterist. There was an old TV set, the kind with antennas you'd pull to get a slightly less fuzzy picture, and a long blue-green couch that had one arm cover missing. There was no coffee table, but in the corner was a comfy-looking chair, and a side table with a book open face down. There were photos on the walls of the lepidopterist when he was younger, carrying a camera and a net. There was one picture Johnny noticed in particular, of a butterfly with discolored wings, and there was a caption. It read in the eye of the beholder. Johnny watched the lepidopterist go into a closed door. Johnny crept through the room, thinking if he had bent his knees, he would be unnoticeable, a skill he had developed when he avoided his parents past bedtime. The door was old. It looked like it would lead to an underground dungeon in a fantasy cartoon. There were large wooden beams vertically held in place by metal bands with a large ring handle. Through the door, Johnny could hear the lepidopterist talking. It sounded like drawers were opening and closing with brief pauses in between on the other side. Then the door opened. "If you're going to just stand there," said the lepidopterist, "then do that inside. Maybe you'll learn something." Then the lepidopterist turned around and went back into the room. Johnny followed the lepidopterist. The room inside was like the museum. The walls were covered with the most wonderful things. A candy shop of critters. There were big ones, colorful ones, some with patterns. There was a butterfly on almost every inch of wall above Johnny's shoulders. The quality that connected these butterflies was their wings were all Frankensteined together. In the middle of the room was a desk, the case with the prize was just above Johnny's sight. The case was placed under a strange device that appeared to be different magnifying glass set upon metal spider legs. In one corner there were filing cabinets. The lepidopterist was looking through them, trying to find something. Johnny sat down on a stool that had been under the desk. He was able to see the case that held his prize inside. Inside the case, the butterfly lay crumpled. The left wing had ripped, the top third hung like a stubborn piece of skin at the butterfly's side. Johnny sat on his hands, like he did when he was told to be still. The lepidopterist moved 4 items to the desk, some tweezers, a small needle, some thread, and a jar full of wings. The jar looked like it was full of confetti, waiting to be launched to begin celebration. The lepidopterist removed the butterfly from the case and placed it under the magnifying contraption. He then selected 3 different wing bits from the jar. One was black and green, one was blue and white, and the last was orange. "Which is your favorite?" the lepidopterist asked. Johnny took a moment to study the 3 wings, gripping the stool as to not fall off. He scrutinized each piece, eventually leaning back and pointing to the black and green piece. The lepidopterist nodded and put the other 2 back into the jar. Then the lepidopterist moved the piece onto the contraption, lining it underneath the broken wing. Carefully, the lepidopterist pulled the wing apart, placing the broken piece into the jar, and then he stitched it back together. "Why?" Johnny asked. "Why did you fix it?" "It's a skill I learned when I was younger," the lepidopterist said. "I don't understand." The lepidopterist said, "It's unique." "Why didn't you just stitch the piece that was already there back?" "I think they're better when they're unique," the lepidopterist said. As he moved to put the butterfly back in the case, the lepidopterist closed the case. And he had already replaced the glass, and found a spot on the wall where he could fit it in, like a giant puzzle. Johnny looked at the wall. Each case had 1 or 2 of the unique butterflies, their wings changing in the shimmering patterns, shifting depending on how Johnny tilted his head. They were beautiful.
Hi, my name is Sophie. I'm a creative writing senior, and I'm going to be reading a short essay I wrote called On the Horizon. The summer before I leave for boarding school, you and I sit in stolen beach chairs at the edge of the sand dunes. The sun is long gone, and the faint spectral light from our phones arcs across the sand but doesn't reach the water. The water roils just beyond our sight. A hurricane is gathering itself offshore, bowling through the Bahamas, headed straight down the alley toward us. Tomorrow we will evacuate as soon as we wake up, but for now, we watch a couple chase their dog through the dark. They approach the dog from 2 sides like sumo wrestlers sizing each other up, knees bent and arms out. The dog is a tiny thing, still a puppy, built like a hyperactive mop and obsessed with his freedom. A hole widens between his paws as he digs into the sand and unearths a ghost crab, glowing faintly. He grasps it in his jaws, gently, as if to say, "Look what I found." I watch your face tighten, and because we have been best friends for 6 years, I know you are praying for the creature to make it out alive. In 6 more years, I wonder if I'll still be able to read your face. If college and whatever happens in between will ruin us. As if manifesting your wish, the ghost crab reaches up with its claws and pinches the dog's snout. The dog tosses his matted head back and forth, and the couple seizes this moment, dives for him, but he's flung the crab off and lunges for the ocean. The trio disappears into the dark space our phone lights can't reach. We went body surfing yesterday, and I spent the whole walk to the beach talking up how thrilling the rides would be. On my first wave, the tide sucked me underwater, and I raked my knees against broken shells on the seafloor. When I came up for air, I swallowed a mouthful of brine from the next wave. That doesn't look like fun, you said, while I coughed up water. It wasn't, and my eyes burned with salt, but I was determined to dive back in the water until I liked the feeling of wiping out amongst the redfish and halibut. What was I supposed to do? If I turned back, dragged the boogie boards home flopping against my sunburnt ankles, I'd have to explain to my parents that I just couldn't cut it. Then again, I never really cared about surfing. I just needed to prove myself to you, to anything. I fixed you with my fiercest bloodshot eyes look and gave you a thumbs up. You've got to try this, I said. So we paddled back out, looking to make as many bonehead memories as possible before we left the island. We FaceTime Victoria from the beach. She answers on the second ring and we scream her name. Vicky, we're gonna die, we yell. Not because we actually are, but because we want someone to panic for us. She has seen the color-coded storm on CNN digitally spiraling toward us. She wants to know what we're doing on the beach. Why haven't you left? We are not afraid, we tell her. I jump out of my beach chair and chicken dance through the sand. I ask Victoria why she's afraid of a little hurricane. We laugh when I pretend to be blown around in the storm, windmilling my arms. The world exists only for us. The hurricane will cower under our beds. Tonight, we lie awake in our shared room of the Airbnb. We've exhausted all topics of gossip. The girl I'm crushing on, the boy everyone thinks you'd be cute with, our dream schools and their cruddy financial aid, our plans for the future. We talk about college like it's a toxic boyfriend. Honestly, if I don't get a good SAT score, I'm going to walk straight into the ocean, you say. And we both laugh, then fall silent. The silence means, and not come back. The palmetto trees outside the window slap the house's vinyl siding, the fronds making long, Freddy Krueger scraping sounds. In the corner of our room, water from another ceiling leak drips into a metal bucket on the dresser, pinging like correct answers on a game show we have yet to watch and don't know the rules to. We try to sleep. I stare at the popcorn ceiling and imagine the hurricane bucking offshore until your breathing evens out, then stutters and unladylike snores. The storm won't leave my mind. What if the meteorologists are wrong? What if the hurricane hits while we're asleep and we're stuck on this island, battered by wind and snapped power lines? The images play over and over in my head. My body buoyed down the street, bloated with seawater. Forever a kid, ruined by forces out of my control. I pull the covers up to my chin like I did as a little girl, scared of the monsters lurking in my closet. The raw scrapes on my knees scratch against the thin quilt, making it impossible to get comfortable. I pull my knees up to my chest where I can press my hands against them and ease the hurting, not that it does much good. The scrapes will always be there, right underneath the surface. I wonder if you hear the storm like I do, louder than ever. How does it not keep you awake? My beach bravado is long gone, but you are asleep, dreaming. I consider kicking you awake, pretending it was an accident just to have company. Instead, I imagine the scenes playing out beneath your eyelids. The dog, catapulting along the beach. The ghost crab soaring through the air, only to land safely in your waiting arms. Your thin kid frame holding a boogie board, striding towards the waves one more time, without me.
Hi, my name's Tyler Kellogg. I'm a senior creative writer, and I will be reading a few excerpts from my chapbook Thank You Note. All the poems are called Thank You Note, just different numbers. So this is Thank You Note 4. His mother taught him it is rude to not write a thank you note after receiving a gift. So this poem is an ode to all the mothers after his mother, all the mothers who brought him milk duds, fed him vegan ice cream, made up the pull-out sofa, did not question the nature she lay buried in. Tendril roots, ash, and him somewhere among the sulfur. He is saying to these mothers, a little part of him winces when their children pick leaves from a backyard oak. A little part of him wishes stationery was not made of paper. That way, when they ask him if he would like to stay for dinner, it would be 100% acceptable for him to spill over black with his own inky gratitude on the kitchen table. So this next one is called Thank You Note 5. He is wary of that teen brooding which holds a puppy, a small chick, and says, What if I kicked you right now? Teen brooding which says, I have to write a dead person into every poem. And there are so many of them, each one hitting the mud of his mind softly, then softer than softly, until a day high and blue cold, when frost snaps the sun and him clear, their bodies hit so loudly, demand a new space, a new life in the space outside afterthought. Ankles, gummy mouth, voice, and all. That he must draw the blinds, sit the whole thing through, no candle, no podcast, no pictures of shelter cats. If this were a short story, now would be the time when he, the author, took himself out of the window of the small apartment, his mind, into the dog park to look at the Shih Tzus and terriers, their shits and little owners bowed to grass, with plastic bag hands. A reminder there is dog shit in the world and people to pick it up. A reminder he is small, edible, and one day will probably be regurgitated. By which he does not mean reincarnated, just like the Deaden poem, one line mounting upon the other, one body within its lineage. So this next one is called Thank You Note 13. That summer, spent on his aunt's back porch, he watched for butterflies at night, little flashes of royalty. But all he got was mid-July bees, a whole swarm overtaking the garden shed. He watched good marriage in action, uncle coming around shirtless with smoker. That summer, spent on his aunt's back porch, he thought little of his grandfather's passing, or his mother's passing, or his father's slow cooking mind. Instead of Chicago, where a great Aunt Dee lived, and all men, formerly boys, before him. How could it be his native /second city, a city with no deer? Was he not every toe and finger something else? Was he not raised to say ma'am like cocked gun? He couldn't help but envy the bees, swarming among their own kind, little winged men and their little winged women. So this last one I'm going to read is called Thank You Note 20. He comes to the end, sorry, for ever calling a woman his second mother. He wrote every image of her open mouth and body crumpled against his grandfather's shoulder in the movie theater that served red wine, his old bomber jacket caping the warmth of her body in as Wreck-It Ralph said something along the lines of, "It's grown-up stuff, you wouldn't understand." When his grandfather lived, he regretted saving her voicemails, because what does savoring your daughter's inflection matter if he was a good father and you never picked up anymore? Actually, he, mother's son, is sick just thinking of this, and is it too much to go back, demand soup, her wedding band, a birthmark pressed cool against his forehead? Is it too much for him to stand 13 and far from the burner at his friend's house, so as not to become blue with the fire and broth of another woman?
Hi, my name is Maddie Grant, and I'll be reading an excerpt from a nonfiction memoir that I wrote titled How to Care for Your Lesbian Daughter, an Exhilarating and Empathetic Guide for the Unversed Parent. Inspiring introduction. Do you have a recently out-of-closet woman lover in your midst? Fear not. This is a common occurrence many parents face at some point in their lives. You may feel as if you failed her, letting her watch all those Keira Knightley and Megan Fox movies. I mean, have you seen Jennifer's Body? She literally eats men as a kid, but that's just a normal response to watching your baby girl grow into a woman that loves other women, that is. Don't let it stress you. Having a gay daughter is harmless and shouldn't cause any permanent injury to you or any other members of your family, as long as you keep her away from those pesky aunts and uncles that might gossip to your parents about her. Haha, those loud mouths. Just sit them in a chair and refer them back to this guide. Sure, they may think they don't have a lesbian daughter, but Cousin Alex certainly has an interesting hair color, don't you think? And isn't that a nice shiny septum piercing? Everyone can learn a thing or two here in the HTCFYLDAEAEGFTUP, short for How to Care for Your Lesbian Daughter, an auxiliary and empathetic guide for the unversed parent. We're here to tell you everything you need to know about raising and caring for your very own girl who likes girls. Footnote 1. This guide is to advise parents with lesbian daughters to help navigate their struggles and the hardships that come with raising a child that likes girls. If you are in need of a membership as a parent of a gay man, check out our sister article, So Your Son Likes Guys, What Now? An abrasive guide for the spirited and unsure parent of a homosexual. Step 1. Set up an open and inviting home environment. You may feel as if it's impossible to make your lesbian daughter comfortable in her own home, but that's simply not the case. Lesbians have many needs when it comes to relaxing and feeling safe in their own spaces, some that you may not have even considered without our help. Here's a list of ways how you can improve her environment and make her feel more comfortable with you in the process. Offer to play CNN sometimes in the evenings, especially if there are any debates going on. Remember, getting into a 30-minute conversation with your daughter about candidates that could determine the future of her rights is a one-way ticket to bonding time. Invite your girlfriend's gay doctor friends for dinner. Having a lesbian daughter is like entertaining the third year of marriage. You've gotten past all that hiding, crying, and insecure text messages. Now you're living on the promise of compromise. Footnote 2. If you don't happen to have a spare geriatric medic waiting around to date you, try heading to some well-known spots where gay men congregate. Our suggestions include bars with rainbow flags, kombucha stands, the gym, and Portland. Next, play King Princess over the house intercom. Don't tell me you don't notice how much your daughter listens to her. We're not sure if it's the rings, the wife beater, or the old money fortune she has, but if a young woman is playing King Princess, there's little to no doubt she likes girls. Blasting her over the intercom is an easy and surefire way to make your lesbian feel safe and present in her home. Step 2. Bring your daughter to lesbian-savvy events. Now that you've set up an encouraging home environment, it's time to bond with your daughter and regain what parts of her personality you may have lost during her years in the closet. But where to start? Lesbians are a difficult breed with cultured tastes ranging from well-known male pop stars to sourdough bread and Shakespeare. It may seem impossible, but we're here to help. Wonder no longer. Here's a list of activities your lesbian might enjoy. Sunday lunch with the grandparents. Nothing more fun than listening to your 75-year-old grandmother ask if you've had your first kiss yet. Sure, you could change up the names, make the Maya a Max or the Juliana Jackson, but where's the fun in that? Watching the local university women's volleyball team. Hey, if you enjoy it, she should too, right? Family baking time. This is a favorite. Can we get a nothing works better for communicating with your daughter than staring at each other as you pour batter in a pan and avoid talking about her friend that stayed over the other night in the guide? Bring her to a softball game. Need we say more? Lesbian daughter supply checklist. Have you gotten this far and still don't know what to get for your lesbian daughter's health and happiness? Have no fear, the lesbian daughter checklist is here. A car. You probably don't want to drive her to a girlfriend's house when that age comes around. Lesbians are pretty bad drivers, so you may want to upgrade to full coverage. Speaking of car insurance, go ahead and add that one to the list before you forget. Do insurance companies take My Daughter Likes Girls as a valid reason for rate increase? Lesbian safe phone. In this day and age, landlines are never enough and iPhones are only for straight people now, so you'll probably want to buy her a Samsung. Not to worry, she should already be comfortable with being ostracized. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aubrey Chapman. I am a senior creative writer, and today I'll be reading some poems from my chapbook, which are letters to the Perseverance rover. This first poem is called On the Map of the Universe, You Are Here, and it is a found lines poem made up of NASA's Instagram captions. 2 words, welcome home. Welcome new age spaceflight. Blink and you might miss it. These stellar nurseries, born in clouds of dust and gases, welcome gazing into the blue, blue eyes of the universe. What a lovely home you have. Everything matches. Welcome deep blues and bright turquoises. Welcome Jupiter's roses. A cosmic bouquet just for you. As you read this, 3 humans are orbiting planet Earth. Welcome galactic attraction. Welcome zooming through the cosmos. Welcome hydrogen, helium, and iron, the same elements in all of our bodies forged in the stars. Welcome the outer parts of our solar system. Welcome perseverance. Welcome life on Mars. It's amazing what you can capture outside the window. Welcome home. This next poem is called Explaining Heartbreak to a Machine, Being Left Alone, a letter to the Perseverance rover. Once I woke up in the middle of the night to the silhouette of my dad moving furniture around my room. He's afraid the entire house will catch on fire because of some cord squished between my dresser and the wall. I'm afraid to pinch cables, and the thought of a house fire where I'm the only one who makes it out. The idea of us moving one step closer to the sun causing everything to burn up to dust. But let's take a step back. Pretend we don't have to worry about the Goldilocks zone or good weather. When I imagine people going to Mars, I imagine everyone leaving without me. Being left behind, working on motion control all alone as the Earth slowly takes back our cities. This next poem is called Space Waltz. Here's a joke for you. In the future, there's this intergalactic fast food chain called Orion's Belt. And even though their breakfast food is out of this world, everyone gives them a 3-star rating on Yelp. Percy, I give everything on Yelp a 3-star rating. That joke, my friends, and dancing all get 3 stars. I'd rate myself 3 stars and call it generous. Here's another joke. There's 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who like to dance and those who like to dance when no one's watching. It's not really a joke, but my friend used to laugh when she said it, pulling me onto the dance floor during junior cotillion. Percy, I swear we did everything together. And I'm afraid this is turning into another heartbreak poem. Heartbreak from nostalgia, heartbreak from people getting up and leaving, and never talking to me again. But really, I guess it's just part of it. Growing up, I mean. It's childish to hold on, but I want everyone who's ever left me to be in one room together. All of us in an Orion's Belt eating blueberry pancakes, and I'm pulling everyone out of their chairs to dance to the same 3 songs on the jukebox. Pretend this is good enough closure. This final poem is called The Beauty of Infinite Parallel Realities. Somewhere out there in some mirror-like universe, there's a version of me that's good at math, or maybe just doesn't cry so much. Percy, I still cry at the beginning of Up, or any time I think about Laika or you being alone in space. That's not important. Pretend I'm the version of myself that just never cried once. Built you in my garage over the summer using nothing but spare parts from a scrapyard and tough love. Pretend I'm the version of myself living in 1957 and I can travel to Moscow just to still Laika before she's sent off to space so I can give both of you a good home. Percy, there's millions of me. All of us a little more put together than the last, and hoping at least one of us makes it to Mars with you. Truth is, I can only imagine for so long about things I can't see, so please, show me something beautiful here.
Hi, my name is Christina Sanchez. I am a senior creative writer from Merle's Inlet, and I will be reading you 2 poems from my senior poetry class. The first one is titled, Dolly, I'm Dancing to I Will Always Love You. When you say you will always love someone, do you really mean always? I once told a girl named Ella that I would always love her, but she went and cut every golden ringlet from her hair and developed a taste for gin and olives. This is the first time in 9 years that I've thought of her. Lately, I have felt like all of the empty bodies I've ever loved. I wish I knew better than to keep them around, but I like the way they drive me out to empty parking lots, turn the music up real loud, and say, the moon is full tonight, so get out and show me everyone you once were. That right there, that's the part I don't like. Because when I say always, I don't mean it, and when I write about dead fish and chopped down citrus trees, I come back to everyone I left. There's nothing poetic about being a liar. Did I ever tell you about the time I told my roommate that my heart felt like a Tupperware stuffed full with a 5-year-old's collection of trash? Capri Suns, chip marbles, candy wrappers, all the good stuff. You see, I've never been good at explaining the feelings I get. I think what I meant to say was that I tend to hold on to bodies that once brought me joy and are now nothing but dead weight and broken bones that poke me in my side. And the second one is from my chapbook collection, and it's titled A Daydream for Sophia. 5:40 in the afternoon, and I'm daydreaming again. Your hands are up in the air, all ink-stained and steady, making shadow puppets. In the flood of fractured light, you've crafted the strange creature of a girl body built up of real sad bones. The shadow puppet thinks she has been writing too many sad poems lately. Maybe it's because she listens to Mitski too much and not enough of Mountain Man's music. Or maybe it's because she's living out of memories, as trite as that might be. Memory has not served the shadow puppet well. In fact, she gave it a 1-star Yelp review for only nourishing her with silver platters of crushes that never cared, and dead cats, and lost keys, and summer without warmth or water or well wishes. Oh dear, the shadow puppet is making this one sad too. Maybe we should try to make her happy before the sun goes down. Maybe we should feed her an orange and tend to the sad bones inside of her with Neruda poems and band-aids from CVS. The shadow puppet wants to salvage what remains of this poem, so she'll tell you all that she remembers to be good. Conversations on couches with friends, and letters about lighthouses, and the Steven Universe song that says, "Just let us adore you." 6:11 and the shadow puppet must go now, so let me say that I think memory only hurts us when we try to live without it. This daydream is coming to a sudden close, and so is the sun, so let me say that I think this poem is me living with memory. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Felix Killingsworth. I am a creative writing senior, and today I'll be reading two poems for you, Wise Woman of Clare and Wise Woman of Clare 2. Wise Woman of Clare. I bleed on my friend's pink sweater when I bust my head on the spider monkey bars in 3rd grade. The teacher from room 315 ushers me into the nurse's office and sits me down on the cot, white paper pulled over the plastic-wrapped mattress. There's a jar of sunny orange turmeric on the counter, sea glass bottles of evening primrose and tea tree oil. Nurse Early is pulling mugs and honey out of the cabinet and reaching into the drawer dedicated to the lavender, chamomile, and Earl Grey tea that Biddy Early brews with 3 clockwise and 2 counterclockwise stirs of a cherry wood spoon. The students believe her tea has known magic because all the other kids talk about having tea with the Wise Woman of Clare while waiting for their parents to come pick them up and hold them until they feel better. And by the end, she has them believing in fairies. Or it might be how she reads the tea leaves once I set down my mug, like there was something special about how I drink chamomile. She tuts quietly, smoothing a hand through my matted hair and telling me stories about her mother bringing her to the fairy circle in Ireland, and how she always found pink shells, sea-worn and softened by earth, buried inland, and she whispered her thanks to the fairies that lingered around hollow trees and circles of white mushrooms for bringing her small, lovely things. I can't remember when my head stops bleeding, but I know that her soft fingertips on my forehead feels like distant bonfires in the middle of the woods and laughing at your friend's bad joke. When I get home that night, my gash is pulled tight with knotted strands of my hair, and I smiled when I heard the doctor mutter it should not have been possible. And then Wise Woman of Clare 2. On the blacktop, I skid my knees while trying to play basketball with the boys, and a blonde girl from Miss Guida's class walks with me to the infirmary. The wall behind the nurse's desk is covered in gifts from students. Macaroni portraits of kind witches, crayon drawings of Nurse Early healing a little boy's scrapes while singing softly. There's a glass bottle on her desk beside a citrine paperweight full of lavender and pink crystal quartz, a slip of cream-colored paper with words I don't know. Nurse Early is drinking jasmine tea with 3 spoonfuls of sugar, and when she sees us, she guides me into a green plastic chair, cleans my knee with a gray cloth, humming Rivers and Roads the whole time. The blonde girl has never met the Wise Woman of Clare, but she listens as the healer recounts an era before magic was feared. But when a child could play with fairies in the forest and come back with a flower crown of peonies and baby's breath and olive branches. People used to try and respect even what they didn't understand, she says. There's a photo on her desk of a younger Biddy Early with another woman, and they are laughing, twirling in a tornado of fallen leaves. We go back to class 2 cups of tea later, and the blonde girl whispers she wishes everyone could be like the nurse, and I smile, asking her if she believes in magic. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dylan Fritz. I'm a senior creative writer, and I'm going to be reading a piece called In Times Like These. When the sky went black, it wasn't really as bad as we thought it'd be. We more or less just kept on. Of course, when it first dimmed, there was some pandemonium. Politicians immediately took stances, told us God or some other being was angry or that they had been expecting this all along, the metabolism of the sun and all of that. And us, how do I even explain it? We were all at our normal John and Mary jobs when suddenly it seemed like someone shut the lid of a jewelry box of which they'd forgotten we were inside. For a second, we all froze, unable to comprehend what was happening. Had someone accidentally flipped the light switch? Did the blinds fall closed? And when several moments had passed and it was still dark, we couldn't help but only whisper, "What is going on? Was this supposed to happen?" And then there was a brief panic. We worried about our children, how much food we had at home. Would there be electricity? Will the water be running? Most of us got dismissed from our work. We had to visit our families. We had to love, to be loved. We picked up our kids in the dark and drove home in the dark. We made dinner in the dark, ate dinner in the dark. That first night was the hardest, and when we woke up to a black sky, it felt like an unrelenting nightmare. The pits in our stomachs grew. It was difficult to see any light at the end of the tunnel when there was no light to see. By the end of the third day, the presidents of all the major countries had read speeches, they had their writers write, and we all read about them in the news. Apparently, some were great and a lot of others were a disgrace, even though they all pretty much said the same thing. And slowly, grocery store shelves restocked, and that was when people started pointing fingers too. If we had been more careful, if we hadn't used our taxes for this, if we had just paid attention to all the signs. Of course, there wasn't a perfect answer, but we were convinced we'd eventually find it. Some magical balance of money and heart that would have prevented all of this. And then one day they announced they'd be sending rockets up into the sky. A man explained it on the nightly news. At that point, we all watched the nightly news. And it sounded like they were sending rockets up for a very noble reason, that it would fix everything. Later, we wondered how they'd fix everything, but in this moment, we were just glad everything would be over with. That evening, things were buzzing with some sort of electricity we hadn't felt in weeks, something we couldn't quite put our fingers on, but it felt fresh, almost like the light we'd been missing for so long. And oh, how we missed it. Swimming was no fun anymore, and everyone had been so pale. We were getting fatter, losing our wills to live. Our bones hurt. We were always tired. All we wanted to do was enjoy a day outside, but it had become so brown, and even though heat lamps kept essential crops alive, it was agreed upon the grass was non-essential. So many things were not essential: restaurants, hotels, beaches, parks, bike shops. And we were fine with that. We understood that would be the price of whatever was going on, and if that was what we could do to fix everything, then we could live with it. Or at least that's what we figured for the first month and a half or so. Then we got restless. We asked each other, why can't we just go out to eat? Who are we actually helping? And suddenly there was a we and a they. They didn't want what we wanted for one reason or another. They were being too safe or not enough. We were too reckless or maybe overly cautious. And then there was the matter of what the government was doing. Everyone had to be so involved with what the government was up to. Are we getting the moon involved? Are we going to venture further into space? Can't you just put it back to normal? And there were so many yeses, a plethora of no's, and an impenetrable sea of maybes. Honestly, it got so muddled that we didn't know what side we were on, and they didn't either, but we would never admit it. And before we knew it, protests were being orchestrated, fundraisers being organized. It all happened so quickly, but we were more than happy to participate. There was a cause, something to fight for. And then it started getting heated. Massive marches, tear gas, tasers. We got so confused. Everyone agreed to color code themselves to make sure we knew which sides we and which sides were they. But in the dark, everyone looked to be wearing the same hue. And in the night or day or whatever it was, we heard them. Rockets going off in all directions. We'd forgotten about them, but there they were in some sort of glory. Trails of fire, smoke, they were disappearing into the night and illuminating the stars, or something like that, but either way, it was a sight to behold. We asked each other, what are they doing again? And no one can tell you. But out in the night, we saw something, some darkened, blackened sphere up in the sky. Everyone whispered, is that it? We tried to remember what it felt like to feel real heat on our backs to slowly burn across our faces, what it felt like to feel sand under our feet, to lie in the grass, to roll down a hill and watch the world around you fade into a whirlpool of color. What it felt like to watch a sunrise, or knowing at some point there would be one. And suddenly we were we again, just us. And we couldn't believe it, but as we all collectively stared right up at the sun we'd all forgotten about up until this very point, glory of all things holy, it lit a flame. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Faith Backman, a creative writer, and today I will be reading 2 poems. The first one is titled Replaying Iron Man's First Scene, with an epigraph. I have a sense of destiny that you are led to the things you are supposed to do. Robert Downey Jr. To not quite understand actors in the surrealistic realm of movies is one thing, but knowing a soldier's comrade's vehicle can be obliterated in a matter of seconds is another. The movie was released in 2008, but that was our movie in the summer of 15. Dad in his recliner, brother on the couch, me in the armchair. Legs cranked up to my chest, eyes watching orange flames launch everything army into pieces. Back in Black, AC/DC sang. I got 9 lives, cat's eyes, abusing every one of them and running wild. They say it's adrenaline. It's the peace sign one throws up while posing for a picture. It gives them peace, gives them sleep at night. Them, those we know nothing about, only camouflage uniforms and loaded guns. They let themselves steer vehicles toward the explosion until we can no longer see the fire. And the second poem is titled A Rattle of Self, 2020. This year is one poetry can't even fix. And if poetry can't be honest about 12 months and what will crawl from the future, you can't be a poet. Words can't flow anymore because you are forcing yourself to settle what is unsettled on your tongue. The problem is, when you think your lips have tucked themselves in for the remaining days, someone still hears you. This is how it works. They dig your grave, you bury yourself. Dirt plunges down your throat, the underground cracks like hyena's laughter. And as you lay face up, back glued down, you tap a fragment of light shining through, and remember, you can't be buried alive by someone who sharpens their shovel, settles it on your tongue, and claims they can be you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm a senior creative writer. This is Engelian dialectic. To get the most out of life, you must be active, you must live, and you must have the courage to taste the thrill of being young. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, the recognition of necessity. And action is worth a ton. The state is nothing, an instrument of oppression of one class, no less in democratic republic than monarchy. If there were no women, life wouldn't be. The middle classes have a truly extraordinary conception. They really believe that human beings exist, only if they make money or help make it. All that is real becomes irrational, all that is solid melts into air. The emancipation of women will only be when women can take part in the production on a social scale, and domestic work no longer claims anything but an insignificant amount of her time. Do you charge us with wanting to stop exploitation? To this crime, we plead guilty. The executive of the modern state is a committee for managing the affairs of the bourgeoisie. In short, the communists everywhere support the revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order. In all these movements, they bring to the front the property question, no matter what its development. They labor everywhere for the union and agreement of the democratic parties of all countries. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims, openly declare that their ends can be attained only by forcible overthrow of all existing conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains, a world to win. Working men of all countries, unite. This is Orange Man Gotta Go. My cousin fell in the river last week. Orange Man gotta go. Drowned him half to death, but Orange Man gotta go. We couldn't afford no hospital for him, so Orange Man gotta go. Ain't even no public option, because Orange Man gotta go. Got evicted in a pandemic, Orange Man gotta go. It is a crime to sleep under a bridge, but Orange Man gotta go. Landlord's got a donkey sign in his yard, so Orange Man gotta go. I guess I didn't do enough for the fight. Now I'm nursing this police dog fight for disobeying the first non-binary cop in town. They said Crybaby in the White House done this, but my cousin fell in the river last week. Orange Man gotta go. Drowned him half to death, but Orange Man gotta go. Feels like I'm only even living because Orange Man gotta go. Can't get no job because ain't no address, so Orange Man gotta go. Didn't ask for no welfare and couldn't pick it up any damn way. Orange Man gotta go.